Hegel has indeed been appropriated in many different ways. At Hegel's death in 1831, one of Hegel's students, David Friedrich Strauss, made the joke that, in fact, Hegel's own school, his own set of students, had really very quickly split into two different camps, which he jokingly called the left and the right Hegelians, making the joke on the idea, of course, that the Jacobins sat on the left side of the table during the Revolution, and the other more conservative members sat on the right side of the table here. The right Hegelians, as Strauss understood it, were people that really wanted to understand Hegel as a defender of the status quo and also a defender of a very kind of deeply Christian and metaphysical view of God's coming to a kind of presence in the universe. That this became, the dominant view of Hegel, especially in the Anglophone world, for a long time. That Hegel was this theorist of this kind of cosmic spirit that was creating nature and then creating us and somehow using the whole thing to come to a kind of awareness of itself and so on and so on. And that at his heart of hearts, Hegel, not all, but mostly what Hegel was doing was retelling Christian theology from a much more extravagant metaphysical perspective. Those were the right Hegelians. The left Hegelians, led by Hegel's close friend, Edward Gans, who was a professor also at Berlin, who lectured on Hegel's philosophy, and Hegel seemed to approve of it. Gans took Hegel to be far more progressive, took Hegel's interest in the French Revolution, for example, very seriously, and saw Hegel as a, you might say, much more intently social thinker. Edward Gans was also Karl Marx's teacher, and the left Hegelian, you might say, line starts from Gans and runs up through a whole bunch of different people. The left Hegelian line appears in European philosophy in the 20s and 30s and 40s in terms of what's called sometimes Western Marxism. Think of Georg Lukács or Ernst Bloch, who later was a professor and giving classes at Tübingen when I was a student there, who really wanted to look at how Marxism really had its roots in Hegelianism and how Hegelianism was a much more active and dynamic philosophy and so on than any of the right Hegelians had given it credit for. That led directly into Frankfurt critical theory here, which very much, you might say, took up the mantle of this kind of left Hegelian view, although I don't think you can say of any of these people that they were Hegelians per se, but nonetheless they were inspired by Hegel and took it into account in forming their own kind of views here. So that Hegel has been, like I say, he's been interpreted as this kind of, grand Christian metaphysician, and also now as a kind of social thinker. The other way he appeared was as this kind of odd, you might say, counterpart to existentialism in the very exciting period of French philosophy in the late 40s, 50s, and very early 60s here, where Hegel was put into conversation with Heidegger, with Sartre and the whole existentialist movement, and with Marxism here. So that there's been a lot of this kind of ways it's been taken up. Hegel's now, if people like Robert Brandom are successful, Hegel will become one of them, or at least Hegelianism of some sort will become a major part of philosophy of language and semantic theory and so on here. So the ones I identify with, of course, I identify with the left Hegelians quite clearly here. I see the line myself as standing in that line that's coming from Gans right on up through the French philosophers and the Frankfurt critical theorists like Horkheimer and Adorno and Habermas, and more recently people like Rainer Forst and Rahel Jägi, just to name a few here. I see myself very much in conversation with people who defend an eloquent view of, say, the version of the old right Hegelian, like Rolf Peter Huysman and so on, defends the idea of Hegel as this kind of spiritual monist, a metaphysician of a grand sort, and so on. But that's at least the line that I identify with. And